Go spend $10,000 on something that you don't even know exists. You'd have to be a brave person.
Right.
What we're talking about right now is Bitcoin, because it was such a great topic in the last audio. Keep going.
Well,
Douglas,
everyone I
Gabriel,
saw
Michael
yesterday,
McKibben.
and what Michael, people called him, and what do they say is, please, 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 give me your advice. Should I buy Bitcoin? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know what to even make of it. So, but
Well,
as you say
answer,
it fooled everybody, and now everybody wants
does.
to jump aboard.
Well, my answer was simpler than that. Run.
Run.
Well, because I mean, this is not new. They tried it with Facebook money back in the mid 2000, I think 2005, 2006, 2007. They tried to push that idea out and it didn't fly. And they even put cards out into the grocery stores and in the pharmacies, and it didn't fly. So they just renamed it. And by the way, that was the investments that the Winklevosses got into was in Bitcoin. But to me, it's just the more we rely on a single source of means of exchange, in other words, electronic with no physical cash, the more we will be controlled by whomever is running that system.
That's what you're pointing out.
And
Centralizing
we can't centralize anything. We need competition. That is the basis for our country. We've got to have competing mechanisms for exchange. Otherwise, we will allow ourselves to be the victims of a tyrant.
Yeah. Are you going to buy Facebook? I mean, it's up to whatever the amount is, and it keeps going up. So I mean, hey, right there, that shows it must be a good company. And I need to invest in it. Same thing, Bitcoin. You're going to have trust in Facebook? Because they say the bubble is Facebook. They watch Facebook. If Facebook explodes, so does the entire stock market. Why? Because it's built upon centralized monopolies, tech lords, and or other types of currency that, like Al Gore's little, carbon currency. That was $5 trillion we were going to pay in 5 years. And then, on top of that, we would be fined for every single corporation that had a footprint. That's a type of tax. That's a type of currency that didn't even exist until someone invented it through mathematics. Numbers lie, liars use numbers.
This Professor Chinchilinsky,
who was Bezos's first teacher. So, the real thing comes back down to the International Monetary Fund and special drawing rights. Back in 1944 at the Bretton Woods conference, when they made the agreement, the great British economists put forth the idea that they wanted to start a currency for the whole world. Well, they backed off of that, even had a cute little name for it, but then they decided on, if you're a member of the International Monetary Fund, then you can draw down special drawing rights, a type of international currency. So even in 44, they were trying to put a global international currency upon us because they knew that the currency was going to get so huge, nobody had that much gold to back it up. Mm-hmm. They had nothing that they could back it up with. That's why we were chatting in the last talk we just had about Bitcoin. It could be put in the basket of commodities now. So some magical Japanese dude mystically somewhere that we don't know if he's still alive, who started Bitcoin, who actually owns the biggest majority of it.
Who says so?
Well, this is the whole point. Who says any of this is true?
I mean, how do you verify any of it?
Yeah. Well, right now, for instance, the stock market. The brokers all say, we can't tell. Everything's broken up. And because of crazy bundled mortgages and all these other different bundled types of things, they don't know where your personal stock is at any 1 minute. Mm. And particularly because of high-frequency traders. And because they are using your 401 Ks and your retirement funds, and the retirement funds of all the states are all in the stock market, right? Particularly in what? Mortgages. Well, it's all fake. We all know that that's fake currency. That was bad currency that the central banks absorbed and they're holding. When they pour that bad currency back out under the auspices of bundled mortgages, bad mortgages, that is a type of currency. Those are currency warfare. There's a currency warfare going on right now with the petrodollar, and Russia claiming they're going to have a gold-backed ruble, or China claiming they're going to have a gold-backed yuan. That's all complete nonsense. Those are attempts at currency wars. Bitcoin, in my opinion, is a currency war. And whether you go after, look what happened with the trust in Al Gore's $5 trillion tax on the world, mostly, well, actually, the $5 trillion was directly from us. It would have been more for the rest of the world, but they were all given, like you point out, exemptions. Only America was going to pay. Jerry Brown, in the seceding state of California, which I just saw beautifully on Truth News headlines, the wall should go all from California all the way down across to Mexico. Go ahead, let them have California.
There are some good folks out there.
Jerry, you always wanted to be the president. Go ahead, be the president of your own breakaway state. You won't last a year. When you have your first natural disasters, you will come begging back to the union, as it were. So it's currency, and these smart people, as you say, they're very clever. They get out ahead of it, and they get control of it.
Well, when you're manipulating the story through the media, you can play ahead of the game, and that's the stock market. The stock market is a game of confidence. And whether you believe that this stock's going to go up or it's going to go down. I mean, you can't prove it. All you can do is look at a bunch of paper that a bunch of lawyers wrote and some auditing firm blessed and say, okay, well, I guess I can trust those people. You don't really know.
That's beautiful. Confidence. They're confidence men, con men.
The whole system is a confidence game. And when you're dealing with sincere people, then perhaps you can have some real confidence. But most of the time, you don't know anything.
And when you do, it's 345-page long end user agreement,
right,
which at the end says, and by the way, the prior 344 pages are abnegated by this last statement I'm going to make, which is we are exempt from all of this.
Yes, right.
That's what they do all the time. But there's none of those agreements on Bitcoin.
Well,
Nobody signed a user.
Did you
see on Bitcoin?
Did you see Jim Cramer's epic rant when Peter Thiel sold his Facebook stock on day 3 of the IPO? Did you see that video?
Yes, I did. That was beautiful.
And
he should have, because it was illegal. Dark pools to begin with, and then changing all the rules to sell it as soon as they get up on the stock market.
Insiders are locked up. That's the way.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's the way it's supposed to be. Because what you don't want from a confidence game is to have a public offering and then have the key insiders who know everything about the stock and what's going to happen able to sell their shares into the market as it's coming out because of their insider knowledge. Now, that's the way you play it, as Kramer said, and that's true. And yet, something like $15 billion worth of insider stock from the names we are now familiar with, all sold on day 3 of the Facebook IPO.
Illegally.
Yeah. Well,
they allowed the deal to go through.
They allowed the deal to go through. Because it was Goldman Sachs, was it? And the SEC did not object, and the brokers all agreed. So on paper, they had all the sign-offs they needed to make it not illegal. But as everyone knows in the marketplace, insiders are not supposed to sell. They're supposed to buy. And yet none of that occurred. Everything was just the opposite of what should have happened and what normally would happen in the stock. So if people needed a signal that there's something fundamentally wrong with our whole stock system, you can't find a better example than what happened with the Facebook IPO.
Every stock market problem comes down to bad auditors. Look at the auditors who put the bundled back mortgages that caused the collapse. That was because they were all lies.
Well, the auditors signed off on these, which were written by a bunch of law firms that were then marketed by a bunch of underwriters who were all in on it. It was obvious they're all in on it.
And as you said, the dark pool for Facebook, they allowed to become huge, and even judges and everybody else, every insider
they made a multi-billion-dollar market in Facebook insider shares that were subject to Rule 144, which says you can't have more than 500 shareholders in your organization without being a de facto public company, 500 investors. And yet what they ended up doing was something called dark pools. So they would take one share and they would fractionalize it and then sell off the fractions all over the planet. And that happened. And that's how they pumped that value up to I think it was like $100 billion.
These are false valuations done by banks,
Right.
and banks.
These guys are brilliant. They know how to make money.
They're clever. They're the gnomes of Zurich. They're these clever creatures from below the earth who only come up here to dazzle us with their brilliant skill, at their cleverness, and fascinate us. And that's what we've become with these monopolies, these tech monopolies. But it's all about false valuations.
So why do people still invest in the stock market then?
Because their 401ks are there, they have nowhere else to put it, and they don't, or they'll buy paper gold or paper silver. They don't even understand you should be buying gold and silver minted coins, as Citibank and Chase Manhattan have done. They have the largest holdings in America of those types of coins. So you want to follow what they do. Are they buying Bitcoin? Well, as we saw with what's his name, Jamie Dimon, he told everybody that he'd fire any of his brokers in America who had anything to do with Bitcoin, and that it was a complete scam. Then he went right over to Europe and bought one of the largest purchases of Bitcoin that any bank has ever bought. He drove the price down to demonstrate he could, and then when it went down,
Sounds like
he
a
went over bought it.
classic George Soros technique.
It's all about economic terrorism and valuation. What is something value? What is it valued at? And that's why Bitcoin's the perfect example of that, or why these companies. Facebook was not worth billions of dollars before it went up on the stock market. I don't believe for a minute that Facebook makes any money except from the government. The NSA pays them as a PSYOPs project. I don't believe Amazon, and we now know that. What was it, last year for the first time? Amazon made a profit?
And don't forget Netflix.
And Netflix, they don't make a profit.
Any money, but they're one of
How
the
do they
FANG
do
stocks.
it? Here's how they do it. They have, just like you pointed out, let's talk about DARPA. Granddaddy Bezos, was in DARPA. When DARPA decides they want something and they can't build it because the military doesn't know how, they farm it out, and then they have people test. And then whoever wins the test, that's who they give the contract to. Then Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, one of the five big comes in and give them infinite money. And what do they do with that infinite money? In the contest, to see who would win, they then buy out the other ones who were the second, third, fourth place. They buy those companies instantaneously. They had no money. Mm-hmm. The only reason they now have a valuation is because they get the military contract. So based upon a future military contract, they get a new evaluation of their company, which then make it worth hundreds of millions or billions in some cases. Now they have that money to get a loan to go buy any of their competition. This is Peter Thiel's. This is what he said you should do. This is what's been going on with DARPA, then later with In-Q-Tel. When we say In-Q-Tel, let's make clear. The Department of Defense, what's it called? The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They do this thing I just described, right? They also use venture capital companies that are private to come in, and they buy in because they're the insiders on these projects that are going to be weaponized. They're going to get the military contract, or else the military already weaponized it and then turn it into what they call open source, which is nonsense, or they give that code to a company. And then that company gets untold amounts of money to buy all their competition, and then they become a monopoly on U.S. taxpayer dollar money. Now, with CIA...
all outside the control of Congress.
Yes. And with the CIA, when they saw that the Department of Defense could do this, they went after cyber war, and for the last 10 years or so, they've been even more active than DARPA because that's where all the big money is in, technology. So In-Q-Tel is a private corporation that gets all the money comes from the CIA.
Formed by Bill Clinton and Larry Summers in 1999.
And they get all the NSA and all the CIA contracts and all the intelligence contracts that are beyond the DARPA contracts. Most of the intelligence comes through them. And then they created a company called SAIC, and then it turned into Leidos. Those are all private corporations who take America taxpayer dollars, which turned into inventions usually stolen in patents from American inventors, and then they turn around, they weaponize it, and then they have these fake investments and they start fake companies. This is standard operating procedure. We saw it first off with Carnegie, with Rockefeller. We saw it with all of the big barons. We saw it with AT&T. We saw it with Cisco Systems. We saw it with. They have always, they know where the money's flowing, and they are always there ahead of time because this is insider trading. No
Right.
bank no broker and bank should ever work together because that's insider trading. So Dodd-Frank.
So you believe that they philosophically do not believe in competition?
No, there's no competition whatsoever. And now we talk about Highlands Forum, which is started by, well, we won't get into all those details. Let's just say that a group that has no minutes, no agenda, nothing is written down, pulls together all the DARPA people, pulls together all the In-Q-Tel, the SAIC, LIDOS people, and they have secret meetings and they discuss what the next thing is.
Which, by the way, is illegal.
Completely illegal. They're all transnational companies.
It's not competitive.
Whatever the secret is gets sold to our enemies too by the same company that makes it for us.
Because they want to create the competition that creates more military-industrial competition. Customers, yeah.
And the top 50 military-industrial contractors for America are owned by the big bankers, okay? Because the bankers support both sides of the war. They support making the weapons for both sides of the war.
Well, Douglas, they deserve it. They've got a lot of people to feed.
They've got risk.
They've got big payrolls to make.
Yeah, they had to put that money out there.
So they have to have that money.
Oh, wait.
So
what war wasn't profitable? There's never such a thing as an unprofitable war.
You know, you mentioned these the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, but I, of course, see that the whole stock market is reliant upon the values of these stocks, but these are companies that, at the very foundation, are based upon a lie. They did not invent or create the technology upon which they ride. So what is that to say? What's going to happen to our stock market when more people become aware of this?
Back in 2012, when we were involved with the Supreme Court filing, that's when Facebook went public. And we noticed when their S1 registration came out that they didn't disclose the Leader v. Facebook legal case, which in a disclosure, you're supposed to disclose all material risks to the investment. And yet there was no word at all about our case in any of their documents. And a number of our shareholders contacted the underwriters and also contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission and let them know about this. What do you think the reaction was? Crickets.
Either that or they themselves bought stock in Facebook.
Well, no, they did, because we've now seen their financial disclosures. They all did. In fact, some of the Securities and Exchange people were some of the largest holders of mutual funds that were some of the biggest investors in the Facebook IPO. So this was clearly the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, in our view. This is my opinion. But they had a plan, and it seems that plan was to raise unbelievable amounts of cash to fuel this consolidation of power and this takeover of the internet and this takeover of communication, this fueling of the carbon credits, this takeover of distribution through Amazon. And the scary thing is now we can actually see that they could be successful if they're allowed to keep going with their plan.
And that's why we keep doing these audios with you, to keep educating and enlightening people. You know, what they've really created is a Gordian knot of lies and evil.
Right.
And they can't undo all that's been done. I know you've got a win-win situation to help Americans keep their Facebook, keep their internet, and get the bad guys out of the game.
Let's get some competition back in this thing.
And we started this interview talking about Bitcoin. So I'd like to hear about the win-win from you, Michael, and I'd also like to know maybe some closing remarks about Bitcoin, anything else that we who are buying it, involved in it, should know.
Well, we've asked President Trump to pay us for the last 17 years, where the government and the entire tech world has had free use of our invention, social networking, and then pay us on an ongoing basis, on a license basis. And so we've asked for $2 a user on an ongoing basis for all licenses, so that everyone who's using social media now can get legal for $2 a month. And then the government can charge whatever they want on top of that as a surcharge, which could be somewhere between $205-600 billion in new revenue for the government, without increasing taxes.
But we're gonna cut out these bad guys, so we will also save money.
No,
there.
I'm not. Whatever the bad guys do, they're going to do, but they're going to have to pay in now.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They're going to have to pay in as well.
And when I meant the bad guys, I mean the characters that we've named that were a part of the original corruption of this.
Well, I think that our legal system has got to do its job. I'm not going to do that part. But in terms of them properly acknowledging the intellectual properties that went into this technology, they have to step up. They have to do what they should have done a long time ago. And so that's the proposal. So we write it. We this ship is listing badly. We straighten it up and we sail it forward. And we need to return true competition into the digital markets.
What can someone do if they're listening to this audio, Michael, to help get this right?
Well, they can put pressure on the government, on the agencies, especially the executive branch, to basically pay the Miller Act notice.
Okay,
that
so
we've
writing
already
their congressmen, their senators, the
writing
White
their
House is the best way to do it.
Writing their congressmen, writing their senators, making noise, contacting President Trump, tweeting President Trump and his officials, and saying, "Hey, let's take care of leader. Let's take care of our real entrepreneurs and our real investors." And then let's get this license going, and let's get this new revenue from the government without increasing my taxes. I mean, if most people know that all the apps that they're using are infringing somebody's technology that's never been paid, I think most people are reasonable. They say, "Okay, fine, I'll pay something," and that's what we're saying. We're not asking for any. We're not going to kill their connections or their Facebook hold. There's a lot of things that can be done now to give them a better choice, but we'll work on that as we go forward with these funds.
And we know this is not unprecedented. Obama did this over and over and over again. He created the United States Digital Service. Hillary Clinton wrote GSA $750,000 contracts for Facebook to do things for them.
Which she hid from public disclosure, by the way.
Of course, $1.5 billion to create an office where all the tech lords, especially Google, sent their tech people to help meddle in the election. So we know that the president can do what the president wants to do.
And by the way, that's not speculation.
No.
There's a picture of that group on Google's website.
Absolutely. They're very proud of what they did. But my point is if Obama can take money from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, or he can take it from SEC billion-dollar lawsuit settlements, and then turn around and shuffle it through an agency and give it to whoever they want, to NGOs also supported by people like George Soros, very left-wing, very democratic NGOs. He can turn around and pay you for your services.
Well, as it turns out, the tech companies who have used our technology are going to get their bonding companies to pay it, so they're not even going to be out any cash.
That's right, exactly. They have insurance for that. And remember that because of that...
You can get insurance for theft?
They're bonded. So all of the work that these tech companies did for the U.S. government has to be provided through a bond. So all of these companies had to buy bonds in order to provide the stolen technology to the government. And that's why you have a bond to protect against this kind of theft. So if you don't pay a subcontractor, this is where a bond comes in and the bond pays it.
But what if these FANG stocks collapse? If I knew what I knew now and I had stock in these companies, I think maybe this is a good time to get out. Not giving anybody advice, but this is becoming more and more a disclosure item that's going to have more light on it. It's not going to be covered up.
Well, you see, that's the big issue here. Why are Americans so numb that they allow these things to happen, or in some cases even get on the bandwagon because they want to benefit just like they watch the big dogs
because
benefit?
they're still brainwashed.
For instance, the Carlyle Group, 400 companies, all based upon militarism. Halliburton, KBR, Daddy Bush, when he was no longer president, went from being a small millionaire to a billionaire in 1 year by joining the Carlyle Group.
Magical.
Absolutely magical. 400, and then they get all the no-bid contracts for all of Iraq. Half the soldiers there were mercenaries paid through KBR. It was all about Halliburton oil to begin with. Remember, it was Halliburton who Dick Cheney had 5 federal grand jury indictments against him for selling equipment to Iran during a sanction. Then he became the vice president of the United States of America. So when I would explain the Carlyle Group to people, 9 out of 10 would say, after I would say, oh my gosh, this company is just, it's taken over everything. They got all these, it's so crooked, and he made all this money. You know what they would say, 9 out of 10 people? Where do I buy their stock?
That's sad.
That's America.
Yeah.
So, your point is exactly right. What if tomorrow we find out that Mark Zuckerberg is the horrible person that I know that he is, okay? And whether it was sexual assault or whether, I could go into all kinds of crazy things, but
one kneel down and a tweet from
Thank
the
you.
president is taking down the NFL.
Facebook,
But if this guy
Facebook
is called
could
out,
be turned off tomorrow
Yes.
for, first off, criminal activities. Second off, because the public simply said, well, this guy's a jerk.
Well, you hope and dream that more people would have a moral backbone and would do the right thing. But as we know, even with the revolution, it was won with only 3% of the population. So I'm just going to think if 3% of our population got a moral backbone and said no to this, dramatic things would happen.
Or if one moral president who simply said, and this is what I love, almost all the articles bashing Trump start off with a headline of, Trump is stopping net neutrality, Trump is stopping
nobody listens to mainstream anymore.
the
except
Consumer
those that are
Financial
totally asleep.
Protection Bureau. You know what he's done? He didn't do any of that. He said, we're going to follow the law. That's all he's doing. He's just enforcing law. When Pocahontas started this fake organization, and then that was a way for him to... There was $9 billion left in one slush fund for Hillary Clinton for phones that were bought for Americans who supposedly couldn't afford phones. Did you know that? $9 billion sitting in that slush fund.
You said it was left for Clinton, but that was an Obama program. Why wasn't it left for
Obama was leaving it for Hillary.
Oh,
Obama phone.
They set all this stuff up.
Okay.
Hillary was going to come in, and in a matter of a year, you wouldn't even recognize America. They spelled out exactly what they were going to do in their intelligence report called The Paradox of Progress.
Okay,
Go
I
read
want
it.
to know more about Bitcoin. Do I know everything I need to know about Bitcoin?
Well, I don't think anybody knows anything about Bitcoin, to be
Right.
quite frank with you.
Yeah, I think that
We don't know the foundation. We don't know the a priori assumptions. We don't know where it's held. We don't know anything.
What we're seeing is that there is this evil cabal running things now, and so maybe we should be...
Here's one thing we do know.
What?
We know that right now, stupidity is rampant on the internet, stating that mining Bitcoin is going to eat up all the electricity in America.
You sent me that the other day, and I just laughed.
You know what it is?
It's stupid.
It's all the NSA's got
It's
to
the
store
NSA.
all this data.
It's
And
Amazon.
All this spying stuff, they're spying and everything.
No.
It's Facebook.
All right, then what is it?
No.
The storage systems. It's the NSA storage systems.
The idea that the electrical grid is connected to the computers and would bring down the grid, that's just
No, that's
stupid.
stupid. That's
okay,
stupid.
but
Yeah.
what is it that they're covering up that needs so much
Well,
electricity?
it sounds to me like fear-mongering. That the average person doesn't understand electric, just like they don't understand bits flying over the computer wires. And so they think, well, there must be a connection between the two since I can't see either one of them.
Yeah.
But I'm an engineer, and the two systems are completely separate. So the idea that the computers could bring down the whole electrical grid because it's sucking up all the energy is just ridiculous.
We called it out. It was a Zero Hedge article, and we got the team together to call that one out. And I've seen other alt media creators doing the same.
Oh,
but I
good.
can't figure out is what was the ruse
Fear.
for?
I think it's fear mongering. The average person would be, oh gosh, I wouldn't want that to happen.
Oh, then when they close it down, then it's
Oh,
okay
no,
because
it'd
it was
be
eating all the electricity.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, I mean, the James Thurber house is in Columbus, and the story goes that his grandmother in the house would put a little catch thing around the lights because she was thinking that the electric would fall onto the ground, and she had to catch it.
Well, you've seen stranger things in our house now, haven't you?
Yeah, feeling better
Well,
already.
thanks so much for joining us, Michael McKibben and Douglas Gabriel. It's always insightful.
Thank
to hear
you, Betsy.
guys.
Thank you, Betsy.